Yesterday there was a 7-way party debate, but over on Channel 4, the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, was taking questions from doctors and nurses and facing off against Health Minister Helen Wheatley. When discussing doctors and nurses' strikes, Streeting basically lays down the basic fundamentals of negotiations. The government have refused to do it. They've refused to sit down and talk to them. And then they go on wondering why the waiting lists are going up. Helen Wheatley thought she had as a zinger by saying that there was no money for it. And that's when Streeting hit her with the absolute biggest truth bomb I've heard for a long time. It was brutal, it was honest, and I'm quite glad that he did it. Wheatley conveniently couldn't hear that part, so she doesn't really respond to it. Maybe because she didn't really want to hear what he was actually saying. But I'm also surprised he didn't actually drop in there that the £500 million they've also wasted on Rwanda. I mean, that could have been used in the health service. It literally spent on nothing. And so here's Wes Streeting explaining why it's not okay to clap for NHS workers and just give Michelle Mone £29 million instead.
Helen says she's out talking to nurses. The most important person that she could speak to right now is Pat Cullen of the Royal College of Nursing, who before Christmas said if the government was prepared to sit down and negotiate on pay, not settle, just to start negotiations, she would have suspended the strike action then and her members would have supported it. She then came back in the new year and said, all right, meet us halfway, and the government still refuses to negotiate. And so, in the end, you have to look at this, and I think this is reflected in the polling. The nurses could not have been more reasonable about this and the way they've approached the negotiations. The government couldn't have been more unreasonable. And I don't expect Helen to sit here this evening and say, OK, well, we'd settle on X percent instead. I don't expect that of her this evening. But I do expect her boss, the Health Secretary, to be in negotiations. And I do expect the Prime Minister to step in now, because if I were the Health Secretary and we'd had the first national nursing strike in the history of the NHS, and now the biggest strike in the history of the NHS, full stop, planned next month, I would be hauled into Downing Street to see Keir Starmer to explain why I failed, and he would be telling me to get round the table to negotiate, and that's what a Labour government would do.
You're saying up the offer, that means more money, either to take it from somewhere else in the health budget, or to go to the Chancellor to ask for more money. Which is it?
Pay terms and conditions, because the pay review body...
But where does the money come from? Does it come from the health budget, or does the Chancellor need to stump up more money from somewhere?
Look, I think it's not for me to solve the Conservatives' problems, but I would just say this. The danger and the risk for the NHS now on this issue of pay isn't that nurses walk out for another day or another 2 days or another 4 days, is that they walk out altogether. We don't have enough nurses in the NHS, we don't have enough doctors in the NHS, we've got midwives leaving the profession faster than we can recruit them in many cases, and we've got countries like Australia and Canada who are actively recruiting our staff here to go overseas.
But I mean, I think an important point, and just picking up on what Wes was just saying a moment ago, and Chris has questioned him, is it's all very well saying there should be more pay, but you've got to have an answer for where the money comes from. Otherwise, it's just an empty, unfunded promise.
Right. Helen, I'll just say respectfully, I'm not taking lectures on where the money comes from a government that has literally sent billions of pounds of taxpayers' money up in smoke through unusable PPE, that's wasted billions in crony contracts to Conservative friends and donors. If you want to know where the money is, look there and stop telling people who've got us through this pandemic that they should pay the price, while other people, friends of your party, have absolutely raked it in during the pandemic. You know, you're now threatening to sack these people for failing to provide minimum standards on strike days. Can we sack you, or the Health Secretary, or the Prime Minister for failing to meet any national standards on non-strike days?
What's your answer?
Well, I think a lot of what you just said there, Wes, is really misleading, and I'll come back on it, but I don't want us to go necessarily backwards and forwards, but I know there's a whole audience in the room with lots and lots of experience. But no, the fact is, anyone in government during the pandemic would have done their utmost to, for instance, make sure there was PPE, make sure there was testing, make sure that we brought forward all the vaccination scheme that we did to get us through the pandemic. So it was right to do everything we could to get us through the pandemic.
Don't forget the highest levels of patient satisfaction was back in 2010, right at the point when the Tories took over the NHS. So if that's square one and people are wanting to go back to square one, well then sign me up. There's been quite a few car crash interviews as of late, and in the playlist that's on screen now, you'll be able to see some of them. So go have a look and watch them next. Thanks for watching, don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.